Hi, Linda. Can you hear me?
Let's see. Starting.
How's it going?
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right.
Did you have a good
Good.
week?
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Glad to hear it. Alrighty, how's your voice feeling today?
It feels fine.
Good.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, what have you been working on? What have you been noticing going well? And what would you say has been something that you're like, I feel like this could use some work still?
Yeah. So our choir thing is tomorrow.
Yes.
So I've been just working on the choir songs that we have.
Right.
We have actually four of them, but I only have music for two of them.
Okay. All right. Absolutely. Great.
Um, and the thing and mostly it's going well. I know it
Good.
pretty well. I'm actually not going to be doing the verses at all on What an Awesome God. I'm just doing the chorus.
Okay, great.
But what the thing that I find challenging about that is that I have trouble finding the first note.
Oh, yes. All right, absolutely. So identifying that first note. Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
okay, great. So we'll work on that today. Awesome. So everything else is feeling pretty good. It's just having confidence with that first note, that entrance. And sometimes actually singing the verses would actually be helpful in finding that first note. Um, Sometimes when you're just listening and then you have to re-enter, that can actually be more challenging. Awesome.
Yeah.
Anything else in particular that you want to focus on today?
Um, so no, just really those two songs. If we have time,
Sure.
I wouldn't mind just beginning to learn to recognize what the key is from the music.
Ah, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, great. Absolutely. Excellent. Okay, have you sung today yet?
No, I haven't. So we will need to
Alrighty.
learn.
No
Yeah.
problem at all. Okay. Great. So, okay, so let's try as we're first getting started. I want to see if we can identify the key of our piece that we're working on starting out. So, when we look at our Awesome God song, What an Awesome God, with Phil Wickham, let's take a look there and we're going to identify what key we're looking at here. So when we look here to identify our key, we're going to be looking at the beginning of the piece where we have our staff. This is a grand staff because we have both treble and bass clef. Treble clef on top, bass clef at the bottom. And then here we see our time signature and we see either sharps or flats or no sharps or flats. And that all tells us something. So starting out, we see one sharp, which is F sharp. One sharp is always the same sharp. It doesn't change. It's always going to be F. The order of sharps will always be the same and the order of flats will always be the same. They're always in the same order. They're always going to come in that particular order. So if there's one sharp, it's always going to be F sharp here. We also look at what are my starting chords. And I also like to look at the end of the piece and go, what is my final chord as well? That's all going to help me identify what the key is. When I look here and I see that one sharp, I know that if I'm in a major key, one sharp is always going to be G, G major. So with sharps, what I do is I look at the last sharp listed. In this case, we only have one sharp. So that is the last sharp listed. And I'm going to go a half step up from that. This is F sharp. So if I'm looking at a keyboard, I go from F sharp, which is that three black keys together, that bottom one, and I'm going to go a half step higher, which takes me to the G. So from F sharp, we go to G. So we think of our musical alphabet A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? So, and that repeats over and over again, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So if I have F sharp, the note to the right of that, going higher, is going to be G, F sharp to G. So I know that this is either G major, or if it's not G major, which I would suspect based on things like what are my beginning and ending chords of the piece. Since I end here not on a G chord, that makes me think, maybe I'm not in G, because normally I would end on a G chord if I was in the key of G, right? Another clue is that I have accidentals. When I look through the piece and I see things like these random D sharps thrown in there, that's a clue that I might not be in that regular major key that I see in that key signature. So D sharp tells me maybe I'm not in G, otherwise why would I have those? So when I look here, I've got those little clues. So that tells me, okay, maybe it's not G major. What is my relative minor? So when I think of relative minor, the way I find it is I'm going to take the major key, that G, and then I'm going to go 3 half steps lower. So looking at a keyboard is helpful for figuring these things out. So if I'm on G, 3 half steps below would be to F sharp, F, E, right? So F sharp, F, E. That's 3 half steps below. So E minor would be my relative minor. And if I look here, I am on an E minor chord to finish the song. So then I go, oh, I probably finished this in E minor. That's a good clue. Now, something odd, though, was that when I first started this song, I started on a C major chord. Now, if I was in G, that would make sense because it's the 4 chord, which is one of our 3 top chords in that key. But in the key of E minor, C major would be an unusual chord to start on. But if I look through, I'm like, okay, there are quite a few E minors in here, right? And if I look through, I can be like, all right, there aren't any sharps or flats, any accidentals in the verse, right? And so when I look through, I'm like, maybe I could be in G major for the verses, but then I'm definitely in E minor in those choruses. So this song is a little bit unusual
Oh.
because I kind of fluctuate between the two. So that's what's kind of interesting. Another thing you can ask yourself is just listen to the song and go, does it sound more happy and celebratory, or does it sound a little mysterious or moody, sad, introspective? If it sounds more intriguing, it might be more of the minor key, the relative minor. Some people just memorize them. So they say, okay, if I have 1 sharp, that's G major, always. And they just memorize it. I personally like to know the tricks to figure it out because I feel like I don't always trust my memory. I like to be able to double check it. I was like that with math growing up too. I always like to be able to check my math. So even if I look at it and I just know, oh, that's G major, I still like to be able to check it. That's just part of who I am. But even in this intro, you see it kind of leads into that E minor chord. The intro ends on an E minor. So it's like, that's really interesting. I see a lot of those in the piece. And then E minor is also the minor 6 chord of G major, which the minor 6 is actually a pretty common chord that you'll find in songs. So that's why it's pretty easy to fluctuate between like major to minor, major to minor. So if I look through, I'm like, okay, I could be in major or minor, and we see like it ends on the minor going into that chorus too, right? Which is a little unusual, and it's like, interesting. Um, but yeah, this is one that it's not as straightforward as some of the
Okay.
others would be. And I find it really helpful to just have either a keyboard or a picture of a keyboard in front of me for when I'm trying to figure that out. So I sometimes will just try to like have a picture of a keyboard in front of me when I'm trying to figure those things out. So for instance, as I'm trying to picture that, I might just, if I didn't have an actual piano in front of me, I might just go find a picture of a piano keyboard. I used to draw them on my music theory tests in undergrad to just have it to visualize more easily to help check my work. But having that can be really helpful. So, like the G would be, we find the three black keys, and G is the one that's right there. So it's the bottom in the middle. So if I have that F sharp, which is that bottom of the three black, then I go a half step up. That takes me to G. And if I want to find the minor, I go 1, 2, 3 half steps down, and that takes me to the E. And I go, oh, I must be in E minor then, right? Um, yeah, so having that visual can sometimes
So,
be really helpful.
so what key do you think this is in?
Yeah, that's
Is
a
it
great
G
question.
or E
Yeah.
minor?
So your ear, like I said before, can be really helpful. So when you think of the song, what does it sound like to you? Does it sound more happy and celebratory? Does it sound more mysterious and intriguing? Or are there certain parts of the song that sound like one or the other?
Celebratory.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah. So that makes me feel then like we just heavily rely on that minor six chord, right? So then we say, okay, it probably is in G then. And they don't really like to kind of resolve. They kind of leave you hanging, is what I would say too. Like they don't give you a strong sense of the key always. Like the very first chord is not the G or the E minor, which is very unusual, but it is the C. So that makes me be like, okay, it's probably then not E minor, because that would be a little less usual that we would have the C. It probably would then be the G, because the C is the four chord in G. And then it's kind of like leading you somewhere, right? So yeah, sometimes it's a little harder to pin down. But a basic just instinct is there, is there that one sharp, then it's G major. But I would say probably it actually kind of goes back and forth a little bit, where it's like major sometimes, minor sometimes. And it goes back and forth, which is kind of a cool thing. So I'm going to show you the order of sharps, and then we're going to go through, and I want you to just try to figure out what then are going to be the keys, right? So I'm going to show you a screen share of this, of the different keys. I'm going to take a look here for a moment at these. We're going to ignore the alto clef, the tenor clef for now. Let's just focus on treble clef, which is the top line. And we see the order of sharps. These are all the major keys here. Alrighty. So take a look there for a moment, and you're going to just look at the order. And I want you to see it's always F, F, C. So F, C, G, D, A, E, B. That's always the order. And the rule is we take the last sharp listed and you go a half step up, and that is your major key. All right, so all you have to really look at is the final sharp listed and go a half step up, and that tells you the key name of the major key. All right, but if you would like to, you can also think of the numbers and then what key that would be, how many sharps there are. And then you can also try to figure out what the minor is. I'm going to have you look at those for just 1 second and sort of like test your brain on that. I just need one moment. I'll be right back. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Alrighty. So, some people like to have little tricks to be able to figure that out because sometimes, they might want to more easily be able to identify like what are the order of sharps. So sometimes we have little like phrases we'll memorize. Um, um, and I've heard a few different ones for that. So a really popular one is fat cats go down alleys eating birds. So you can just remember it like that. Fat cats go down alleys eating birds is one that's a pretty popular one. I'll go ahead and put that into the chat for you. And so if you want to just memorize the order of flats, that can be helpful.
Is that sharps or flats?
I'm so sorry. That is sharps.
Okay.
I said the wrong thing.
Okay.
That is for sharps though. I just
Mm,
brain for some reason
no.
said the wrong thing.
Oh,
But that is the order. Fat cats go down alleys eating birds. Um, and then another I've heard is Father Charles goes down and ends battle. But there are a few different ones. So you just pick your favorite and then you just memorize it. Basically, is the key there.
okay.
Um, what's another one? Funky chickens get down at every barnyard. I've heard a few different ones. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so then you just pick one that you like and just memorize that one. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, so the key signatures um, can be really helpful, and practicing um, with just those sharps starting out can be helpful. I'm going to have you do with me real quick. We're going to go through a little flashcard game, and I'll give you the link to this so you can practice with it yourself. So when we see three sharps like this, so this is treble clef, three sharps, F, C, and G sharp. We look at the last sharp listed. We're only doing majors for right now to practice. So if G sharp is my last sharp listed, what would then be my major key if I go a half step up?
A.
A major, yes. So, correct. And if it was minor, it would be F sharp minor. So you can start to think of that. Now, we didn't go through the flats just yet,
That's
but
okay. One step at a
um, yeah, the flats are the opposite order. So if you memorize the sharp order, flats are going to be the opposite order. So
time.
when we look at it, we're actually going to go, instead of forwards like that, we go backwards. So if you wrote out your sharps order, you know the order of the flats. So when we look here, it's B, E, A, D, G, C, F, right? And that's all of them. So that's all of the flats. And just a simple way to memorize is if everything is sharp, it's C sharp major. If everything is flat, it's C flat major. So that's a little trick you can use. For flats, we use a slightly different rule for figuring it out. If it's one flat, we just have to memorize because the rule doesn't work. It's just F major. So we just memorize that one. But otherwise, we take the second to last flat listed, and that is our key. So for instance, if I just had two flats, then I go, okay, E flat's the last one listed. B flat is the second to last listed. So B flat would be the key. Here, my last is F. My second to last listed is C flat. So that's my key. So this would be C flat major for that one. And then A flat minor, you'd figure out the relative minor the same way, where you go three half steps to the left. So if I start on C flat, which is the same as B, then I go B flat, A flat, and it's A flat minor. So the figuring out the minor is done exactly the same way, right? So this is another flat one. So if I take the second to last flat listed, that would be the second one here, right? Because I have three. So what is that second flat? I have B, then what?
E.
E flat, yes. So it's going to be E flat major is my key here. So not E, E flat major. And then C minor would be the
Oh,
minor
I'm
key.
sorry. How come it's E flat major instead of E major?
Ah, yes. So E major would be with sharps. So if there's a
Ah,
flat in the name of the key, it's a flat key. If it's
ah,
not a flat, just a regular note or a sharp, then that's going to be with sharps. That'll be a sharp key. So F is the only exception. So F is the one that we memorize. B flat in the key signature is F always. And that one doesn't have a rule to follow. We just have to memorize that one, unfortunately. But
okay.
otherwise, it will always be flat if it's a flat key.
All right.
So this is the tricky one because it's the one that's the exception that we memorize. So one flat is always F. F major, it just always is, and we just memorize that one. And if it was minor, F, we go E, E flat D, D minor is the key. So here I have the three flats. So B, E, A, I take the second to last flat, it would be E flat major. All right, so I'm going to send you the link to that little practice flashcards to practice with this
Right.
week, and then you can check your answers as well there. Alrighty, so that's in the chat for you.
Copy it.
Alrighty, so then we also today want to be sure that we can identify. We'll come back to this next time as well and review more, but we want to be sure that we can identify that starting pitch when you're entering the chorus. All right, so you're not singing on the verses, which is
Yeah.
the part that sounds a lot more to me like we're in the major key. Um, and then and then yes, the choruses do sound very celebratory. But then just at the end of that chorus, our God is an awesome God. It's like it switches into minor just briefly there. And that's where you've got the accidentals as well. So you can kind of see that in the music written out for
Okay.
you. When you start having those accidentals, it's like, my key probably changed here. So it's kind of a little clue for you. Um,
Okay.
so when we are listening to the entrance from the verses into that chorus, we have to get really comfortable with what we're hearing there. I'm going to go ahead and share what I'm looking at um, with the sheet music here. So we're going to hear as they're entering that even the wind and waves obey our God. So, what I'm thinking here, because it flows out of your verse, is kind of sing along, if not out loud in your head. Even the wind and waves obey our God, right? So, you actually are in your head singing along with them. And then you just actually start singing out loud on our God, right? So in your mind, you're going to be singing along with them on the verses. Fortunately, we've been practicing that, so it'll be pretty easy to do.
Yeah, one thing that's hard is that they are actually doing it an octave lower.
Oh, right. That
So I
makes it
have to
trickier.
be
Yeah.
translating
Yeah.
that to an
Even the
octave
wind
higher.
and waves obey our God. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is trickier. Yes, good point. So another way that you can maybe do that is listen for the G, which is your entering note. So, for instance, they sing it on the demons have to run, the angels have to praise. The demons have to run, the angels have to praise. Da 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 da. Da. So maybe find that note and then just like really quietly to yourself kind of hum the and practice finding your note for yourself. You even hear it earlier. God is great. That's the first note they sing. God is great. God. Mm, 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 mm.
Okay.
So maybe practice listening to the track with like, Phil Wickham singing, and then practice identifying what is my note going to be that octave higher. So when I'm hearing God is great, give him all the praise. Hallelujah, name above all names. Da 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 da. That's the note. You're just going to be the octave up, right? So
Okay.
then practice that finding your note. And that's where also I find if you kind of sing it along in your head, we call the fancy word for it is prephonatory tuning, which means you think the notes in your head before you sing them. So if you the whole time are there down here, God is great, and you're God is great, give him all the praise. You're singing it in your head in that upper octave, your octave. That's going to help you to find it. Yeah. So if you just kind of sing along the entire time,
Okay.
hearing that in your mind, that is going to help quite a bit. But you also, because you hear the G so much, can find your note from it. Mm, 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 right. When in doubt, you can practice, da 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 da, the whole scale up, right? So I think practicing maybe listening to your track and then hearing the male vocalist and then being able to, in your mind, find that upper key without them, that's helpful. So, yeah, because having a strong entrance is going to be important. So that's what I would recommend is really practicing listening and then finding that octave above. So why don't we practice as an exercise? I'm going to give you a note and then you're going to practice finding the octave higher. All right. So if I give you what would be your A above? That's it. Yes, good. All right. How about this one? What's the F above?
Oh.
So you harmonized with it. You went
Oh, I
to,
did.
yeah, you went just a third
I don't
above,
know.
which is fine. So you were actually in the chord, which would still sound really pretty
Okay.
in a choral arrangement. Which actually is kind of the key when you're singing harmony or when you're singing in the context of a choir. If you're going to mess up, like land on a note in the chord and you're fine because
Okay.
basically no one is going to know that it's a problem. Maybe other people in the choir and your director know, but the audience isn't going to know. It's still going to sound pretty. So my guess is that when it's a note that's in your range, it's going to be easier to find. But if I play like a D and you're like, that's really low, and it's not really in your comfortable range, it's going to be a little harder to find. But like the A, you could still sing that. I think it's a little bit easier to find the octave up. So the ones that are really going to be important to practice are going to be the ones that you're like, I'm not comfortable singing that note that you just, played or sang. But yeah, so practicing finding the octave up, I think is going to be a really important exercise for this week. So let's try that same note again. So what's another way of finding that note other than just jumping up the octave? What if I do in the major chord, like an arpeggio? Da, 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 da. That's like the, what is that? Da, 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 da. It's like the morning is broken, right? Da, da, da,
Oh.
da, da. Right? So that's one way you could maybe think of finding the octave with the arpeggiated pattern. So that's the octave. So maybe in your mind, practice some other ways of finding it, like that da 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 da. Morning is broken, that pattern. But we also just practice arpeggiated patterns often. Da 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 da. Right? The da 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 da. We practice those patterns. So that's a way you could find it as well as thinking of the arpeggio. Yeah. So let's practice finding another note and I'll work that one back in. So how about this one? What's an octave up from that one? That's right. Yes. Dun, da. And that's actually the one you're gonna need to find in the song because that's your G, right? So our God is an awesome our God, right? So that's gonna be the G. All right, so let's try this one. That was it. Yeah, you weren't as confident with that one, but you found it. Yes. How about this one? You wanted to do one that was a little bit lower, but that's all right. You were like, that's all right. And my guess too is the way they relate to the note that has just been played before. If it's not in the same key or whatnot, it's a little more confusing. It's like, wait a minute, what? Because you have to put your brain into that new key. So that's where maybe finding the major chord can be helpful. Do, 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 right? So yeah, I think sometimes it's the order that I put them in. It's like, that's confusing. What is the note? Because it doesn't feel like it fits. All right, let's try this one. Good. That's one that was harder before, but you nailed it this time. So da 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 da. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. So when you're listening, it's going to be a lot easier because it's going to all be in the same key, right? So,
Right.
now that phrase, even the wind and waves obey, that one might be a little bit harder, but if you start looking for the G ahead, like from the demons have to run, the angels have to praise. Right, if you start there, dun da 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 ba 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 da 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 our God. So in your head, try to sing along with them in that higher octave. But if you do get a little bit off, try to find the octave up, and that's going to help you to find your note. Let's look at some of the entrances from the others and make sure we have so that one's going to be a little bit different because it doesn't always start on the same note, right? So the let all the saints, that's going to be your entering note there. Our God, our God. So we have that let all the saints. That's the one we're looking for. Worthy, let's see, worthy is the lamb. Lamb is the same note as well that you're going to be starting on. Cross, shame. So I might maybe go through this week and circle in your music the note that is your starting note in the verse before it to identify for yourself, because it's a different note each time you enter, right? Because it's our God and then our God. So circling the D's in that verse 2 so you can identify that note ahead of time before entering can be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you have, let's see, verse 3, what do you enter on there? We enter on the E. My God. It's the same note as God this time. So what we do there, we're going to look for E's before in your verse. So when I look through, E is actually a lot harder to find here. We don't have it actually in that verse. So for this one, what you could do is maybe think to yourself, find the D and then step up. Or another thing you can do is you end on the awesome God. That note is the starting note. So you can kind of like hold on to that in your mind. My God. Another thing you can do though is listen for that D. Pain. My God. Because they do the D many times. So you have a couple options there. You can either hang on to it from the prior chorus, or you can find it from the D. Could be another option, or, practice just singing along with it in your head in your octave to find it. Um, so that would be the hardest one just because we don't see it in the music of that verse prior. So that'll be the trickiest one, I think. So practicing finding that octave is going to be really important. Identifying the notes in the verse prior that are the same note so you can remind yourself of what that note sounds like. And then when it's the E, either holding on to it from the chorus prior, singing along in your head so you can find it more easily, or finding it from the D are going to be the keys there.
All right.
Yeah. I know that
Okay.
that's a lot to practice, but yeah, sometimes it can be really tricky to find your entrance note, and you will have to kind of walk it from another note that you know what it is. And using that pre-phonetary tuning is the fancy word, but it does work. And then because you're not used to hearing somebody singing that octave below and then having to find your note from it, practicing this week, giving yourself a note and then finding the octave higher. Like,
Okay.
listen to the recording and then maybe like pause it or stop it randomly and be like, can I find the note they just sang an octave higher?
All right. I think
Just
I
to
can
kind of
sing
test
along
yourself.
an
Yeah.
octave higher in my head, actually.
Oh, great. Excellent.
So I
That
think,
might be the easiest way to do it then.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome.
Okay.
Great. But I
All
do
right.
think it's helpful for me to identify what are the notes in the verse before that are my starting note. And that just kind of helps reinforce as well and give me more confidence. So I like to do that for myself as well. So
All right.
hopefully you got some good little nuggets out of that you're like, that's going to
Yes.
help me.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
awesome. Great work today. We'll
Okay.
review the key signatures next time, but try to do some of those flashcards that I sent you the link for this week
All
too,
right.
to be practicing that. And any hymns you guys do, any pieces that you have in choir, try to go through and be like, what key am I in? And just test yourself a little bit this week, okay?
All righty. Will do.
Awesome. Great to
Okay.
see you and work with you today,
Thank
Linda.
you.
Hope you have
All
an
right.
awesome rest of your weekend,
Thank
and
you.
I'll see
You
you
too.
soon. Bye,
Okay.
Linda.